Fusion Mobile, quality e-learning experience on the go.
Welcome to Fusion Mobile e-learning clinic. My name is Sonia Lalo and I'll be guiding you through the chemistry course. In this particular lesson, we'll be considering the hydrocarbons and crude oil. Crude oil. I know you've been hearing a lot about crude oil. We'll look at what hydrocarbons are. We'll try to explain them. We'll try to also look at what crude oil is. We'll look at the fractional distillation of crude oil, oil refineries, and petrochemicals. Alright, let's go. Hydrocarbons. Just from the name, you can tell hydro and carbon. So unlike what you think, hydro usually mean water, yes, but in this particular case, hydro doesn't mean water. Hydro means hydrogen and carbon. So hydrocarbons generally are substances that contain hydrogen and carbon, or carbon and hydrogen as the major constituents. They are substances that contain carbon and hydrogen as the major constituents. So it might come in form of a methane, which is HC4. It can come in form of ethene, which is C2H4, and it can come in form of ethyls or benzene, which are C6H6. But today we'll not be looking so deep into all these complex structures and other substances, but we'll just look at the introduction to it. So what is crude oil? Crude oil is a mineral resource which is being harvested, used to produce most of our petroleum produce, which are being used by the masses, people. Of course, our petroleum, our petrol, our diesel, our kerosene all come from the crude oil. They all come from the crude oil, and Nigeria happens to be one of the crude oil producing countries in the world. There's an organization known as the OPEC. This organization is responsible for uniting the nations which are oil producing nations all around the world, and they have interactions on oil prices and such. In a few seconds, some questions will be displayed on your screen to test your understanding of what has been taught in this lesson so far. Please do answer them, and we'll see in a bit. Crude oil has been discovered in Nigeria since 1956, and ever since then, exploration of crude oil has been done in Nigerian land in different sites all over the nation. Nigeria today happens to rely so much on crude oil for the production, for the financing of the country. It is one of our major resources which we capitalize on. Crude oil contains many agents, many components in it. It is just like a mixture of components. That's why when we want to separate the crude oil, we go through the process known as the fractional distillation. We discussed, of course, earlier in this class, one of our earlier classes, we discussed separation techniques, and we talked about fractional distillation. We said usually it involves you using heat to release different components, different substances of a particular that are inside a particular mixture at different temperatures. So in a fractional distillation of crude oil, what we always have coming out first is the gas. That's petroleum gas. After the petroleum gas, which are usually structures of carbons in the first four classes of carbon. That's the ethane, the ethenes, and ethynes. Then the next group that come out are the petroleum ethers. The petroleum ethers. These ones fall within the group of 5 to 8 of the carbons, of the hydrocarbons. Then afterwards we have the petroleum gas. That is the petroleum itself, our petrol. Then we have kerosene coming up next. Then we have the oil gas, also known as diesel. The oil gas and the diesel. Then after them come the lubricating oils, and after the lubricating oils we have the residue, which is the bitumen and the other stuffs like that, the coal tar, the bitumen, and the rest of them, which are actually very heavy and can't come out. There are different temperature ranges is being used to bring out each of these substances. In the laboratory, you can conduct the experiment, but when it comes to mass production, we don't do the processes. You don't use the process that is used in the laboratory for mass production, because it will be time wasting and the amount of quantity that will be produced would be very little. So we do use petroleum is being broken down, that is crude oil, is being broken down in oil refineries. In the oil refineries, they have very, very big distillers, and these distillers do operate at different temperature ranges. It's these temperature ranges that help them to decipher or to note which particular gas or which particular substance is being produced at that particular point in time. So they have different tunnels where they will channel the petrol, the kerosene, the diesel, and the others like that. Even though it is not a fixed boiling point, it is a range of boiling points. Alright, let's continue. In this particular lesson, we're still looking at petrochemicals. So what are petrochemicals? Petrochemicals are chemicals which are made from petroleum produce. Of course, when we collect our produce from the refinery, our petrol, our kerosene, you don't just pump them out into the field and start using. They still have to go through several processes. So you see, there is what is known as petroleum. There's the gasoline, which our car uses. And there is also what is known as the aviation gasoline. Aviation gasoline is not used by our cars. We also have what is known as the kerosene, and we have what is known as the aviation kerosene. Our kerosene, our normal cooking kerosene, is at a particular temperature, a particular quantity. It even contains some quantity of water. But the aviation kerosene is what is being used by aircraft. So the aviation kerosene is what is being used to fly our aircraft, our airplanes. So after the particular substance that has been collected, further purification is still required to attain the desired ambition or the desired goal of the production. Of course, in the production of synthetic rubbers and other components come out of these petrochemicals. So that is what petrochemicals talk about. Chemical products that are made from the petroleum produce which have been extracted, that is from crude oil. Alright, in this lesson we've considered hydrocarbons and crude oil. We talked about hydrocarbons, where we defined hydrocarbons are chemical compounds that are made up of carbons and hydrogen mainly. We also discussed crude oil. We talked about crude oil as a major source of hydrocarbon which we find around us, where we extract our petroleum, and we talked about how to extract the petroleum from the crude oil, which is via fractional distillation. It can be done in the laboratory, but for mass production, it is being done in oil refineries, and the oil refineries have their big plant systems for producing these things. After producing it, the oil refineries still go ahead to purify it further and use it to make other components which are known as petrochemicals, synthetic rubber, fiberglass, and some other components like that, which find a lot of application in our day-to-day life, come from this produce, petrochemicals. Alright, I haven't learned so much about petrochemicals, hydrocarbons, and crude oil. Some lessons, some questions will be displayed on our screen in a few seconds to test your understanding of what has been taught in this lesson. Please do well by answering them. And if there is any part of this lesson which, any of the questions which proves to be challenging, you can go over the video one more time for better clarity. Thank you.